We'd like to say hello to everybody. We're honored today to have our two forefathers of the marching band program here at Jacksonville State University, the Marching Southerners. We've got Dr. Finley and Dr. Walters with us. And we just want to kind of document the history of the band program. And you know, it's always better when you hear it from the horse's mouth. So we tried to get everybody together so we can go through some of the historical documentation of the band for future reference. We'd like to start with Dr. Finley. And Dr. Finley, could you just kind of maybe talk a little bit about the early years when you first got here? I know you mentioned to me that you actually came here to teach brass before you actually started teaching the band.
Yeah. That's right. Well, I came in as a brass teacher, and also when I came, I had to take woodwinds and percussion as well. Of course, the band director is pretty well does that as part of his job. But and I didn't have anything to do with the band. But I had one really good student, W.H. Ashburn. I remember him. He was, and of course I did have some too. Now John Thomas was here. He was trumpet, but he was one of my students. But we got together. First thing we had was started with a trombone quartet, and we were able to work that in. And pretty soon I added some trumpets. And we ended up with about 2 years with a brass choir, which we did a lot of touring and traveling. And that was pretty much it until about 1956. Dr. Duncan, who was the band director at the time when I came in, Dr. Duncan had the band, and he had gotten an offer in Kentucky to go up there as the head of the music department, so he went there. And they dropped the band in my lap. Well, I remember having to scurry around quite a bit to get uniforms, and they were nice enough to get new uniforms for me. We had a band of about 48 pieces. I picked up, all I had was his band, a few others. That's Harold Somerville had been discharged from the Army in Arizona. And he came over, and he came in as first real tuba player.
Was there a lot of people from your brass choir that came over into the marching band? Did they all?
That's the one reason we could enter and do as well as we did the first year.
Because you had your brass. Well, were there very many woodwinds in the band when you first?
Not too many. No, that's right. The woodwinds were short all the way along, up until I'd say about the time you came, we started getting more in there.
Mm-hmm. So you said you had to get uniforms. I guess, what was the percussion like? Did you have a lot of drummers to choose from? Or?
I had about three snare drums, bass drum, and that was it.
Wow.
But pretty soon we added some tenor drums. We've been to recruit by the second year. By the third year, 1958, it was really a very fine band at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It drew a lot of good comments.
Now, when you first started with the band, of course, I know being a tuba player, the 20J, the Con 20J is dear to my heart, but the Southerners actually started out with using some sousaphones.
Well, we inherited the band that Gene Duncan had, and all they had was sousaphones.
I guess so. That was post the name Southerners.
Well, the name Southerners came in on, actually, it was the second year. Mm-hmm. We put out, toward the end of the first year, we put out the request that the band members think about naming the band, and Norman Paget was the one that thought of the Southerners. And
what year did you get that first 20J?
Well, I was going to ask Harold about that. I believe we got that by the second year. Uh-huh. What it is that Dr. Stone was a superintendent of schools, and he had gotten them and brought them over. He got 8 tubas, 4 of which he just sent up to us, mm-hmm. and that was the 20Js. That's what I'd wanted anyhow, so it worked out very nicely. They were Navy imports.
Yeah, which is amazing that you know, traditions like that have been able to stay for 50 years, and of course, you know, plan to continue it for the next 50 years. Well, you know, thinking of the marching band, when you took that over, I'm assuming you took over the concert band as well at the same time?
The whole band program, yes.
So, and of course, I'm sure that the kids did both marching band and the concert band. And you know, it's so ironic because it's the same way here at Jack State. Now, so many other colleges, you know, a lot of kids that are in the marching band, they're not in the concert band. And I think we're very unique. We got a unique situation here to where the kids want to do both. You know, it's not you don't have to force them. And, you know, I think a lot of that, of course, is what you and Dr. Walters did by, you know, starting such a quality program and kind of having the vision that you guys had to put a quality program on the field. Dr. Walters, what about just comparing to like Dr. Finley's early days? What about when you first arrived at Jacksonville?
Well, I had never heard of Jacksonville, and so when I came down here, I hadn't met anybody from the music department, and Dr. Montgomery had just hired me over the telephone. So the first day of school, they had a meeting up. We had a little old White House up there on the corner there where International House now stands, and they were having a meeting of the student workers. And so I came into the room, you know, and Dr. Cantrick was the head of the department at that time, and so I just sat down in one of the chairs, and they were finally finished up the meeting, and he was giving everybody their assignment, and he gave me my assignment too. And I told him, I said, well, Dr. Cantrick, I'm not a student. Oh. And so I told him I was the new band director, and that's how I was introduced to Dr. Cantrick anyway. And so we used to have, there were some rooms in the back there, and John had the corner room back there, and then the next room was where I taught. I used to teach the high brass, and John taught the low brass. And I tell you, my experiences here have always been good. And John really is the one that helped me out when I got started here. We talked about what they had tried to do, and of course, my experiences are much like John's. You know, I came up, I played in the high school orchestra for 4 years. I played in the college orchestra. I played in the Hamilton Symphony. And you know, I was in the Navy for 6 years, and we hated marching. And so when I first went out of my first job, I wouldn't have even had a marching band except they made me. And but, you know, just doing it over the years, you know, you sort of develop. I never was able to just throw it off and say, well, I'll just get by. I tried to do it the best that I could, and over the years you develop momentum, you know, for the marching band. And anyway, John kind of got me started and told me what they had tried to do and so forth, and
Kind of picked up the ball and ran with it.
yeah, and I think the thing that was most distinctive to me was, you know, our band always sounded different than other bands, and of course, John and I both had the same idea that, you know, in applied music, you try to teach somebody like they're going to be a player in a symphony orchestra. I mean, too many people, you know, say, well, you know, if you're a jazz person, we'll do that, you know, but if you're going to be a good jazz person, you need to know the basics just like anybody else. And so John, of course, was an advocate of big bore instruments, and gosh, we used to bore out the mouthpieces, and but anyway, John helped me to get started, and the kids were always good to me, you know.
You know, expecting those big bore instruments, one thing that's kind of funny here, that we had a trombone there, was later on was named the Gray Ghost. It was a silver bass trombone, and it had been there for about 4 years, and no one wanted to play it because it's a big bore. And I went there, and even the paper was still around, you know, they would pack it in, and that was the first of the big bore instruments. But I did, as Dave was saying, I did use the large bore instruments, and pretty soon we had 88H cons and 42B box trombones.
You know, speaking of the Gray Ghost, believe it or not, that instrument was still around when I was a student.
I know it was.
I came in, I was a freshman in 1983, and I'll never forget Roger Reed played the Gray Ghost, and it was still around then.
Well, the thing of it is, they didn't want to play it because nobody knew really how to blow a big bore horn, and it takes a special kind of breathing and all of that to do it. And we started gradually getting in the 88. I'm pretty well always like the 88H. 42B is all right, but I've liked the 88H, and I had one myself when I played with Birmingham. And it was a slow thing, but by the time the 56 came, we had a number of those already in brass choir. And that I was grateful for the fact that I had started the brass choir, because it really made the thing go. By as I said, by 58, the band really was something to be proud of, because they played real well. But now when it came along here with Dave, when he came here, following the bad year we had when I had to be out at Peabody, and following that time there, the band really just fell apart. And I know Dave, I think, still thinks of that as being, he had to rebuild it. But actually, I thought what it was, the kids were still here. They were around there looking around the corners at this new guy, if he's going to be like the other one, you know. And, but pretty soon, it didn't take you long, Dave, about a couple of years.
So when you took a leave, the band program kind of went down in quality?
Well,
and
I don't know if it was that so much, just the man that took my place just didn't understand it too well, I guess. So it did collapse.
I tell you, it's definitely a unique program. I guess you have to be a part of it to really explain. You know, those of you out there that are Southerners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I wanted to ask you one thing. Dr. Walters made me think of this. He mentioned that he really didn't care for marching band much, and I guess when you got to Jacksonville, that was the first time you really dove into the.
No, I taught 10 years before I came here.
You did have to do it in.
Yeah, I started up in Ohio. I started out in Hamilton, Ohio, but no, just over the years, you know, having to do it, you know, you develop momentum for it, and by the time I got here, I liked marching band.
Well, when they put the band in your lap, had you had to do marching band before?
Yes, high school, Franklin High School in Tennessee.
Okay.
But my interest in marching became, actually, I was a member of the Post 5 American Legion Band in Nashville, Tennessee. And every year we went to the National Convention. And the main highlight of that was the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps. And my friend, Sammy Swore, was also a band director, but he was one of the Nashville schools. And Sammy and I both, we used to go in that was the first of the new company front bands drum and bugle corps. And the only ones that you had in the country was just people who were veterans. These they see now, which are mostly high school kids, they came along afterwards, and that's all you see now. I don't ever hear of the others, like the Hawthorne Caballeros and Riley Raiders and all of that.
That's right.
That's what we had back then. Well, that's where Sammy and I both, we enjoyed the marching band, although certainly I always appreciated the concert more. But we enjoyed doing that because we both worked together on that.
So the Drum and Bugle Corps really had a very early influence.
Well, not so much that, it's just the fact we were all together in there in this American Legion performance. I was really a member of the band, not the Bugle Corps. But we all got in there. It was just a new current anywhere. It was after the Second World War.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything like that before.
Well, you know, something that the both of you, I think, established early on is just people's perception of marching bands. And, you know, a lot of times you have really great musicians that may look at a marching band program kind of like, I guess they think of it a little bit less important than some other groups. And you always deal with that as a marching band director, but the sound that you both created with this band, I think opened the eyes of a lot of musicians to say, you can really have a musical group on the field. And how did both of you go about establishing that big sound that the Southerners, you know, are still known for today? Do you think does it boil down to the breathing that you talked to the
breathing, but just the concept of how a symphony orchestra, brass makes it sound, and that's of course it couldn't be done outside of going and taking it into the private studio where they take private lessons, but learning to breathe properly, and also using the bighorn, the large mouthpieces, and that's what brought it across for us. And it took it takes a person about a year to get that from my students. But it was really just a matter of concept, and also having a technique of breathing properly. The proper embouchure, a lot of people are using a stretch embouchure, and you had to bring them in to get a bunch embouchure like that, where the mouth bunches inward.
So let me get this, going back a little bit about the transition from Dr. Finley's time to Dr. Walter's time. So you had taken a leave of absence to go to Peabody, correct? And then right after that, upon your return, is that when Dr. Walters was hired?
I decided that I wanted to go into music education.
So during the transition, did the both of you kind of work together, making that transition smooth from, I guess at that time John Knox, was that the name that had come in your absence?
No, he was my assistant band director.
He was your assistant, okay. And then did y'all work together your first year, or how was that, how did you guys seam that together?
Well, John and I taught in adjacent rooms, I mean, and we talked to each other every day, I guess, and I did the band, and of course John, I hate to tell you how many students John had. I think he had 40 applied students at one time, and so his day, started at 7:30 in the morning and just went
Until.
And same way with me. I had one time I had 40 students, and gosh, you have to teach all day and then come back at night, and teach a little bit at night to get all your students in.
You taught percussion as well, didn't you?
Well, that was later when we came down to this building. We didn't have a percussion specialist, and I felt bad about that and tried to get Dr. Montgomery to hire a percussionist, and he always rebelled against that. And he finally said, well, generally 15 is a load for a applied person that's teaching nothing but applied. So he said that if we had 15 percussion majors, that he would hire somebody. So I taught percussion for about 5 years, I guess, until I had 22 percussion students, and then he hired Greg Bigler from Kansas. So that was the first time we had a percussionist here, and I was really, that always amazed me. We had such a good drum line here, and it didn't have anything to do with what I knew about drums, because the only thing I knew was how to spell it.
Back in my band, Hoyt LaCroix,
yeah, and
fine percussionist.
we used to get some really good drummers out of Emma Sansom, and they always had good leadership within the section, and so like I say, even though we didn't have a percussion major, they had to major on some other instrument like baritone or something, and it was amazing that they had the fortitude to stay with us. But the drum section was always excellent, and it didn't have anything to do with me. You know, it's just that we had good people coming in.
You know, you talked about the good leadership that came in, and I remember as a student, when I was a freshman, you know, a lot of the section leaders in the band, as a freshman, you would almost look at them as if they were just right under faculty level. I just remember them being such good teachers, and they were just regular students in the band. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's unique about our program.
Well, that was my idea of education anyway, is to, you know, to teach them how to do it, and if you have an assistant band director, I always felt like I'd have to spend some of my time finding things for him to do, and if he were a flute player, he couldn't handle the trombone sectional as well as somebody that's really a fine trombone player. So I just learned early on to depend on these key people. You know, if I wanted somebody to do a trombone sectional, I'd have my trombone section leader do it. And same way with the clarinet section or the flute section or any other section. And
I think that is one of the unique things about the Southerners, is that I know we had great importance on. First of all, we had a slate of officers. The president, in particular, was very important. A lot of times, I felt I could not really communicate with the band on that about something, maybe something had gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And Harold Somerville, for instance, who started in his sophomore years, and he's held band president for the rest of his time there. But Harold Somerville would take him out, and I said, Harold, why don't you go take the band down there, and you'll sit down on the tree there and talk about it, and you work it out. And he would, and that solved a lot of things. And the second thing in there was the fact that the section leader was a very important person. He was responsible for his section, marching and playing. And I think that's probably a little more emphasis there than most bands would have, that we had here.
And you know, we still use that same concept. And when I went off to grad school, you know, as being one of the drum majors of the Southerners, when I was a student, I was, of course, it's hard to imagine things being run any differently once you get so used to it. And I know when I went to grad school, it was very different to be in a college band, to where I guess the section leaders didn't have as much responsibility as what they do in the Southerners. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we've talked a lot about the musical aspects of the band and leadership, and of course, Dr. Finley, there's another area of the band that you know, you started that we need to talk about, is the marching ballerinas.
Marching ballerinas, yeah.
And such an incredible addition to the band. What first gave you the idea of starting a dance line with this?
First of all, I got tired of working with majorettes. Main reason because you take more than two of them, and it's hard to get any precision. And in twirling, I mean, when they learn a routine. And when now they had majorettes here under Dr. Duncan. He had just a traditional block band with majorettes. But I was always impressed when I went to New York City. I was always impressed with the
Rockettes.
The Rockettes, yeah, Rockettes, yeah.
I never forget my first time when I saw them.
Yeah, they really impressed me. Still do, for that matter. I mean, but they used the gay 90s style of kick, knee flex, all of that sort of thing. And I was thinking it would be well to have dancers would have a lot more impact visually than do the same girls doing majorette type things, twirling. And twirling is hard to do, and dancing is not easy, but it certainly is more natural for them to come into that, because most of them have danced anyhow. But my original thing, I didn't mention this, but back before Duncan left, he was wanting me to take over the marching part at that time, and I had the idea of having an all-male brass band, and the idea was to consider the field itself as not being just marching in a normal way, but it was more like a stage. And my idea was to have that, and then we would have a group of girls who were dancers trained by a professional person, which we actually got to that part. But another thing I didn't have, and that was to have a chorus on the field. and blend them all in and when you built your show. That was my original idea. But then I always it bothered me about the block band because it never has seemed natural to me on the field. And so that came about in the early years with the American Legion, Drum and Bugle Corps and bands, which I was actually sort of on the ground floor of that because when they were first starting. And anyhow, they had, the idea sprung from there, and we went on then to let it develop on into company front. That's the main thing, open it up, because it was eating up the uniform. The uniforms would eat up the sound in this block. And you spread them out this way, then all the sound comes forward that way. And that was the basic idea that I had.
So you eventually got to a point where you were able to get a professional choreographer?
Zenobia King Hill was that. And I thought was real good. She liked to do that. And she actually did more than, she took a spring class. They all had to go through a spring class and successfully pass that. And then she would come up and work with them and teach them the show, put their part of dance routines and that sort of thing, yeah.
And then they just continued that style, Dr. Walters, after you became the band director. And I know when I was here, Kay Smith was the choreographer.
Yeah.
Did she come after Zenobia?
Yeah, Zenobia left. I can't remember the year, but she left sometime in the 70s, and she and her husband went to Florida. So at that time, we hired another girl that I can't remember the name, but now that I think of it, I can't remember what I ate yesterday. But anyway, just after a couple years, finally we did hire Kay, who was a professional dance instructor, and she was with us until I retired. I feel, that in the early 60s, all the bands were, not all the bands, but most of the bands were doing something that was close to a company front, like the University of Tennessee, for instance. And they used to do all those diamonds and stuff, which are just step 2 formations and so forth. And then little by little, you get the Cassavant influence coming in, and then the Moffat influence coming in. And, you can't help but look at everything, and you steal anything that looks good or that you think you could use. And then by the middle 60s, our kids started looking at bugle corps, because we used to talk about it a lot, and a lot of them would spend their summer in a corps and they'd come back, and they had ideas for the flags, and so we, little by little, started looking at the bugle corps and taking from the bugle corps what we thought we could use. And like I say, a lot of it was student leadership. I think, kids go to all summer with a bugle corps doing flag work, and then they come back and they teach the flag work here, and so little by little we just a natural evolution.
I remember when I was a student seeing the Southerners. I was so impressed with that rifle line, the precision of all those rifles up front, and was the movement of the color guard expansion, was that kind of brought on, I guess, through the drum corps idea?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, people like Darrell Lusry, for instance, who was not only an excellent flag person, but boy, he could really handle the rifle, and And we had some good people come through, and that were really, excellent at that business, and so we utilized them, and of course they were a big contribution, to the Southerners.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess when you added the ballerinas, Dr. Finley, that added several numbers onto the total of the band. All of a sudden,
Yeah, we put on the field about 65, I think. Mm-hmm.
So that made a. I guess
we also had the colors.
Was that a big? How did the crowd respond? How did they respond the very first time you brought the ballerinas out?
Standing ovation. Well, the whole show was standing ovation that first time we went out, and we got a lot of good comments on that. Mm-hmm.
Well, that you had to be really proud. Did
Yeah,
you have any idea in the back of your mind that you were starting something that would carry on for so many years?
No, I just worked it along. Just worked along with it, and I was not knowing. I really had no idea that it would go where it's gone. That's right.
What's it like for you now to see the Southerners and to know that you had such a huge part in starting that, and do you still see glimpses of the same things in the band?
Southerners. The main thing is the fact that nobody really has ever gotten a Southern sound. Because I don't think they have the idea. But one thing is your trombones, particularly your bass trombone. Now, most people don't know how to use a bass trombone when they're writing the things, but Dave there knows. I mean, the things that he wrote was just, I think, it's the finest in the country. But I don't know. I didn't have a real idea. I just grew into it. Looking back on it, I see it clearly. I see a real clear, clean path all the way.
Just the timeline
where it is now. It
from.
never stops.
Yeah.
And another thing that made, of course, the band go was tremendous enthusiasm and spirit. They've always been. And I think it's very unusual in a college group.
Yeah.
You find most of the time they don't have that kind of excitement. But these the band people here have always been like it would at junior high school or something. Boy, they get really excited about it. And not only that, they carry it through with hard work. And that's the secret of the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're going to be succeeding with something, you have to work very hard.
Yeah, that's true. The couple things that amazed me, was first of all, how they accepted me. I used to be the only Northerner in the Southerners, and they always accepted me, and I just was always amazed at the desire to work hard, and like for instance, if we had a performance on Saturday or something, and we used to change the show up a lot. And get rained out a couple days, and the show was kind of a little bit on the ragged side. They'd want to come in Saturday morning and rehearse, and they'd hog-tie me if I didn't say we were going to do it. So, yeah, they always had that enthusiasm and the desire to really do it well. Yeah.
And that spirit is that's one thing. That's a clean line all the way from the beginning clear on up to your band. That they're very proud of what they do.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of spirit in it, and if it's not right, then they'll work hard to make it right.
That's right. Yeah, that's something I noticed, with the band today, and we're so fortunate. The kids are so talented. We just we're really getting very talented musicians in, and as a director, I can mention one day that this is kind of rough, and boy, the section leaders will, by the next day, it's usually fixed, and it's just. I'm amazed at that kind of dedication to the program. Dr. Hodges, I know Dr. Finley had mentioned some of your arrangements and everything, and I know that there's no telling how many hundreds of tunes you've arranged for the Southerners during your career. And what was it like to be able to, pretty much know that you had a group that could play just about anything you write?
I think that's what I used to tell the young ones that are interested in arranging. I say, that I tell them, first of all, I say, one thing about it is young arrangers very seldom get worse. And we used to laugh about those kind of things, but my general thoughts on arranging is this. Arranging gives you the capability of writing for what's staring you in the face. Like when I first came here, we had 2 clarinets in the band. Jimmy Lee and let me see, Tom and Tim Camp were clarinet players, but they played drums. And we had one.
Tim was drummer, Tom was clarinet.
Mm-hmm. But they both played in Southerners on snare drum.
Did they?
Mm-hmm. Both of them.
I believe it.
Of course, Tom was mainly the drummer, and Tim was a clarinet player. But anyway, like I say, since on the field, two clarinets, there's no sense in writing for two clarinets. I let them play first trumpet, you know, because, you know, but little by little, as the low brass grew, you know, where you get more tubas and more trombones and baritones, that foundation of the band is the secret for good sound.
That's it. That's it.
You know,
Low brass.
and of course you learn to voice with experience. You know, it's like, you know, now Macbeth wrote the Pyramid, you know, about how you should have most bass and then most tenor, alto, and finally you only need one piccolo, you know. but not many people do that. Most people's band are upside down, you know, like you have one tuba and three trombones, but you got 18 trumpets, you know, and everything's backwards. But no, you try to write for what you have on the field. It's a little bit of an advantage, you know, to do that, because that way, you know, you know what they're capable of, and also
You can make them sound their best.
yeah. I think that's what I used to tell the young ones that are interested in arranging. I say, you know, that I tell them, first of all, I say, one thing about it is young arrangers very seldom get worse. And we used to laugh about those kind of things, but my general thoughts on arranging is this. Arranging gives you the capability of writing for what's staring you in the face. Like when I first came here, we had two clarinets in the band. Jimmy Lee and let me see, Tom and Tim Camp were clarinet players, but they played drums. And we had
Well, Tim was drummer, Tom was clarinet.
Mm-hmm. But they both played in Southerners on snare drum.
Did they?
Mm-hmm. Both of them.
I believe it.
Of course, Tom was mainly the drummer, and Tim was a clarinet player. But anyway, like I say, since on the field, two clarinets, there's no sense in writing for two clarinets. I let them play first trumpet, you know, because, you know, but little by little, as the low brass grew, you know, where you get more tubas and more trombones and baritones, that foundation of the band is the secret for good sound.
That's it. That's it.
You know,
Low brass.
and of course you learn to voice with experience. You know, it's like, you know, now Macbeth wrote the Pyramid, you know, about how you should have most bass and then most tenor, alto, and finally you only need one piccolo, you know. But not many people do that. Most people's band are upside down, you know, like you have one tuba and three trombones, but you got 18 trumpets, you know, and everything's backwards. But no, you try to write for what you have on the field. It's a little bit of an advantage, you know, to do that, because that way, you know, you know what they're capable of, and
Make them sound their best.
yeah.
Well, you know, when you were arranging things, you know, I don't know if you remember Burning the Midnight Oil, but some specific tunes like, say, Quilting Party or your arrangement of Dixie, did you have any idea in your mind that they were going to be such big hits and stick through so many years? Stick through so many years?
No, I had no idea. You do what you need for tomorrow, you know, sort of, you know, when you, and like we played Quilting Party for a number of years, and I tried to take it out of the folder and get something new in, you know, and they always get on me and make me put it back in, you know, and I don't know why that was so popular, but they always enjoyed Quilting Party.
Well, I tell you, even today in 2006, the Southerners wouldn't be the same without playing the quilting party. And about what year did you arrange Dixie for the band? Do you remember?
I arranged that early on. I think I arranged it in the 60s, late 60s probably.
Mm-hmm. And the band they were already playing Stars Fell. Mm-hmm. You played that when you were the director, correct?
Well, that's another thing. We set those out as being things that would go on with it forever. Stars Fell on Alabama was our theme song. Mm-hmm. If you want to call it a theme song. It was an identity thing for the Southerners.
We used that almost continually, that Stars Fell. Yeah. And then also we used to have a closing fanfare that John had that Yelverton had written, and that was a really nice closing fanfare. I think it was very effective.
And would you do that at the end of every show?
Yeah.
Pretty much? That was just your standard beginning and standard ending.
That was the signature things. Mm-hmm. You know, like the signature, a lot of your name bands have the signature piece, and you know, forever. But that was Gerald Davis. Gerald Yelverton was the person who wrote that. Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Finley, what was your inspiration for Southerner Special?
I was wanting to use California, Here We Come, Here I Come, and it has a nice drive to it. I wanted something as an entrance. In other words, Starsville, Alabama, then an entrance piece that would last just exactly 16 measures. Well, I beg it's maybe 32 measures probably. But the reason for that was just to have a driving piece like that, and I had trouble getting a clearance on the other one I'll tell you about, and so I just sat down and wrote it.
We still use that today as well.
Yeah.
And you know, hundreds and hundreds of people are so excited to see you guys conduct tomorrow on our 50th anniversary. I know, Dr. Finley, you've agreed to conduct your Southerner Special, and Dr. Walters, you've agreed to conduct your arrangement of Quilting Party. And you know, I just feel so fortunate that we've got such a great repertoire. And you know, the band still starts every exhibition performance with Stars Fell in Alabama. We do it as our backfield warm-up, and all the kids in the back of the stadium just go crazy. Yeah. When did Salvation come about, Dr. Walters? Do you remember about the year that you arranged that? And
no, on Salvation, I think that came about the time that Darrell Uthry was our drum major here, and I don't know, we had used several things for warm-up, but then when we got to using Salvation, I think everybody kind of enjoyed that, so we continued to use that for, I guess, clear up until the present time.
Dr. Finley, you had some more comments on Southerner Special.
Yeah.
You were starting to say?
As I said, we had trouble getting the other one cleared. California, Here I Come. That's what I was going to use that, but they didn't respond well. So I just said, well, we need this thing, something we can use permanently. So I set out, and it's very short. I could go ahead and write the rest of it and have a march or something out of it, but this was for one purpose, and that was to enter the field. And of course, you know, we started this thing of marching and stepping forward. We would step off. Most bands would step off on the left foot, forward march, and they go with the left foot. But we started, we bring that down hard on the line and step off with the right, and it just propels you forward. We started with that anyhow, but I don't know that at the time I wrote it, I don't know that I thought about keeping it, but I decided I would because it had got a good reaction to it, and so it was just something I had to do as spur of the moment.
No, I was going to say that when, you know, in the early years that I was here, we used Southern Specials a lot, and we used to, remember we used to do a silent drill at the end of the,
silent drill.
And of course a lot of the old timers still remember the silent drill.
Yeah,
you know.
if you make the entrance, you do the silent drill. They seem to get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
I put that in as something that just seemed like a good idea, but I didn't think they'd catch on to it. They still, we were talking about the other day at a group, and they said, I remember it. They said, we're trying to remember it.
And they would just do all these maneuvers with no drums playing?
There was nothing.
It was silent.
But it sets up its own rhythm with the feet would set it up. It's kind of a cross rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah, we did one show where we did the Southern Special backwards. We played the music backwards and we marched backwards.
You know, I've heard that. I always thought it was just one of those tales that somebody started. So that's really
Oh, it was one of those things where we just, you know, in a session we was talking, you know, somebody was talking about, we knew that so well we could do it backwards, and so we decided, well, we'll do it backwards, you know. And you know, when you hear a tape of something backwards, you know how the attack is strong, and then the note will peel off, kind of. Well, in doing it backwards, you have to simulate it the other way, you know. And you know, we used to do that, and it's kind of fun. We had a good time with that.
Did anybody realize what it was when you did it backwards? Other than the band members?
We announced it from the PA system, and.
Well, you know, Dr. Finley, you had mentioned something about the propelling off with the right foot from the line. Now, with the marching style, let's talk a little bit about that. You guys, you did a high knee lift. Was it on count one? Every 4 counts. Do a high knee lift.
One of the things in marching that has always been a thing that I've noticed is that when you can do anything where you just do one thing and it's a skip and you do another one, even if you're not marching as precise as you should, it'll make you look precise. And some people will do that in just a hand motion like that. And everybody does it once, and then they go on and
kind of catches everybody's attention.
But that's what that was for, was just a high knee lift.
The other thing about that is, you know, John's right. Most bands always step off on the left foot because that's your strong beat, like 1 and 3, like in 4/4 time, and so that then, you know, like if you're doing 8 to 5, then when your left foot comes up, it hits the line, which is your strong beat, rather than hitting the line on a weak beat. The other thing about that is, you know, John's right. Most bands always step off on the left foot because that's your strong beat, like 1 and 3, like in 4/4 time, and so that then, you know, like if you're doing 8 to 5, then when your left foot comes up, it hits the line, which is your strong beat, rather than hitting the line on a weak beat.
Yeah, and if you try to step off cold, everybody has a little bit of wobble before they get started. But this, if you bring that left foot down hard and then step off with the right foot, it's beautiful.
Kind of propels you.
It propels.
Yeah.
It does propel.
Well, you know, it's so interesting to watch how the marching styles have changed through the year, because I know you used the high knee lift, and of course, Dr. Walters, through your time, that's when the high mark time, I'm sure, became popular, where you did the high mark time anytime you stood still.
We used to alternate them, sometimes low mark time and sometimes, but that came from the bugle corps too.
Yeah, it was.
And of course, today, anytime the band stops, you know, it migrated to a point to where, you know, the low mark time where you keep the feet on the ground, but now you hardly see the mark time. Whenever you come to a point you stop, all motion stops, you know, and then you move forward or backwards. Yeah. But it's so interesting to watch the evolution, I guess, of the marching units.
Yeah, in the coming up into the 80s, see, we were right into bugle corps by that time, and into the bugle corps marching, and into the idea that, you know, the audience is up there, they're not over there and over there, you know. so yeah, the evolution is gradual, you know, and of course, to keep in the forefront of things, you know, you have to look at what's going on around you, and of course, I think in the early days when we were bugle corps kind of oriented, I think we were way ahead of many college bands. But the college bands are kind of caught up now, you know. It's not that big difference like it used to be. So much difference between us and the other college bands around.
When we first started this in '56, we were the first band in Alabama. I believe that probably, other than what's his name, John? You mentioned it earlier, Cassavant. other than Castle Band, now he was using a company front, but he was still playing marches and things like that. We generally played show tunes.
Mm-hmm.
But when we first started on that, it was the only band in Alabama, that's sure. And I think probably Florida, Georgia, and not Tennessee, because Sammy Swartz band did it up at Isaac Litton High School in Nashville. My Franklin band was working on that before I came here. But we were really the first band. The company front. But the thing to me that has always marked the Southerners is the sound.
Mm-hmm.
And people try to imitate that sound, but they really never do. And they don't realize that what it's based on is the large bore, low brass.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that makes the difference. They get their trumpet sounds pretty well. There's real sizzling sounds in there. But
And most of the trumpet players, in order to play high, they have a very shallow mouthpiece, which produces a shallow sound.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it does.
And there's, I don't know, that sound doesn't carry as well either.
Right.
It'll burst your ears up close.
It just goes a few feet and falls on the ground, doesn't it?
If you play a horn right, you can use a large bore mouthpieces. And,
The other
and
thing
get
about
all the range.
the other thing about those early bands is, see, now John coming from bugle corps background, see, we had like the first year I was here, I inherited these guide-on flags. See, John had those, and I don't know, of course, a lot of our people today are not old enough to remember how the old bugle corps used to go. They used to do drills with 4 guys and a guide-on, and they'd have these little squads going around the field, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came here, we had guide-on flags, which was about what, about an 8-foot pole with a flag on it, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so we had flags from the first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now we got into the twirling flags later, but I would say in the early '60s, we were the only band that had any kind of flags on the field.
Hmm.
The other bands were more into majorettes and that kind of thing.
Well, you know, I think that's something that, you know, our success today, we have to attribute it to the fact that both of you were never afraid to try new things with the band. And, you know, it's so hard, I know, with a college band, once you kind of get something going, a lot of people, especially football fans, they want to see the same thing year after year after year. And, you know, I'm so thankful that we're able to, you know, let our tradition be excellence as opposed to coming out and playing the same thing or doing the same pregame or the same type show every single year.
Yeah.
And
bands like Ohio State, for instance, they've been doing that. Ohio State with the tuba player, you know, they've been doing that for so many years. People come and they expect to see that, you know. Mm-hmm. And gosh, I don't know. I think you have to have a little bit of evolution, you know. You have to stick around to see the newer things, and you take what you like and discard what you don't like.
Well, I think that's one reason that, you know, a university with only 9,000 students can have a marching band of over 350 people, because the kids do see things that appeal to them, you know, and it's not anything worse than what they come from.
I've had an awful lot of people that tell me the thing that made them come to Jacksonville was the Southerners. I know Glenn Walden told me he was a bass trombonist that came here. He has his doctorate now, and he's a librarian, music librarian at LSU. But Glenn Walden said that he came to hear it, and he said it just knocked him out. He stars fell. He said that's the big one they like, and he really did. That's the reason he came. I guess I've had 15 or 20 people tell me that that's the thing that made them come here. John Carruth is another one. He came, he heard it, and he came.
You know, that's still so true today. I talk to kids. I'll go out and visit high schools, or I will conduct an honor band, and of course I'm always trying to recruit. If I can ever get them on campus and they hear and see that band, then we've got them.
We sure do.
You know, if we can make the chill bumps rise on their arms, they're going to come to Jack State.
It's odd too. You know, these people up on the hill that work in recruiting, they'll tell you too that, you know, they have forms that the kids fill out when they come here as freshmen, and many of them, even though they're majoring in history, they say, "Why did you come to Because I saw the Southerners."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's still the case.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's another area I want to go into that just, it's a huge part of our history, I think, that all of us hold dear as a Southerner. And I want to talk about some of the college rivalries that were established, especially between the bands. And everybody out there watching this DVD, you know exactly where I'm headed. But Dr. Finley, in the early years, what did you guys have rivalries with any specific colleges?
Well, only Troy.
Troy, and even back then it started. Well, how did it start out whenever you were the director? What kind of sparked that
You know, that's
competitive
the thing.
edge?
I couldn't tell you that. I just know it was there. I think it just came about because two similar colleges, both of them are striving to be the best. And I think I really think that's just the way it started. I mean, the whole college is that way. I mean, all of Troy and all of Jacksonville. It's just as a real rivalry there. It surely is.
So even back then, was that a high point of the season for the kids to work towards the Troy show?
I suppose so. I don't know. I never heard them talk much about that back then, but they were aware of it.
I think that developed a lot into the 70s. It developed more after Johnny Long took the Troy because he built the band up quite a bit from where it was.
And he was a Jack State graduate.
Yes, he was, and he was a big promoter, you know, and they used to come up here and every time we played, and we'd go down there every time we played, and of course it kind of became a kind of a fun rivalry. Crazy things used to happen. Of course, I didn't get in. I got credit for a lot of it, but I didn't. I didn't get involved in it.
Well, I tell you, I remember coming in as a freshman in 1983. The moment I couldn't wait for was that Troy show. You know, and that was like, you know, that was bigger than homecoming. That was bigger than Tropicana Music Bowl that we used to march at. That was the moment we all lived for every year. And I just remember working so hard because we just knew we had to go out and put on an incredible show. But yeah, and I remember some of the little things with the Troy beanies, and you know, if you ever got one of those, then that was something to be proud about, I guess. But it was just, you know, it's such an incredible rivalry. And I know my first year as a director, Troy had gone off of the football schedule, and when I got here in '94, we didn't play Troy State. And then they came back on the schedule in 1995, and I remember we spent an entire year, my first year, kind of just, at that point, the kids really didn't know what it was about. They had already forgotten, you know, they had heard about the rivalry, but I know we spent that entire year just kind of preparing for the 1995 Troy-Jack State game.
Yeah, they used to spend a lot of time thinking of things to do. I remember one time we went down to Troy, and the bass section always, from Troy, used to try to kibitz on Jacksonville and find out how many tubas they had. And I don't know, I think at that time we had about 16, 20 Js. And so they decided when they went down there, what they'd do is they'd leave, you know, we used to walk into the stadium single file. So they decided that when they would, and the bass section used to be last in, and so they decided what they would do is leave their horns on the bus, and there was an old sousaphone. Our instrument room was over here next door, and they had an old sousaphone, and so what they did is they left their horns on the bus and marched in without a horn, and they got one of the little girls that played clarinet. It was Jean Jackson. She was kind of a small girl, and they put a sousaphone on her, and she was the last one coming in, and that was the bass section. But they were always thinking something to do. I can remember the time Gerald Davis was great on Troy games. He used to spend a lot of time, and one year it was a year that Johnny Long was Educator of the Year, and his face was on the Olive Brev, and so what they did is they, down in Gerald's room, they cut out a cardboard band member and put a Troy uniform on him and a tam, and they blew the face of Johnny up on one of these reproducing machines and put his face on both sides, you know, and Gerald went up to uptown and got 3 of those great large helium balloons, and he couldn't get them in his car, so he had to walk back, but he could get them on the bus. And the idea was they were going to release this band member at the halftime when Troy went on the field. So, of course, from noon when we left here until 9 o'clock at night when the halftime came, it was cool, you know, and it kind of like a fog rolling in on the field, and it was just still, you know. And by that time, the helium had leaked out of most of the balloons, and so he got cocky to release this figure, you know, at the halftime. So Troy comes on the field, and he releases this band member, and it just rises real slow, you know. And I'm standing up on a top bleacher, you know, and it just gets right up here, and that was it. And it just stayed there, you know. I wish I had a film of that. It was kind of funny. But anyway, I got credit for a lot of that stuff.
I was going to ask you, did you get in trouble a lot for things you had nothing to do with?
Yeah,
I'm sure you probably did.
Well, things like that don't bother me. So
Well, I know the personality, you know, that's another thing with the Southerners is that personality's never left. The kids, they work hard, and I think they enjoy having a fun time, and you know, we've been able to establish a good mix of both having fun and working hard, and I think that's one thing that makes the program so enjoyable.
yeah, it's a lot of those little things that happen. You know, like, you know, for years, you know, the kids used to say, whoop Troy, you know,
Yeah.
and they used to conjecture about where that started. But where that started really was with Bobby Henderson and Doyle Grizzell. They were members of the band, you know. They were both trombone players. And they started that years ago. Yeah, they had a lot, you know, they did have a lot of things, you know, they used to do about Troy, you know. And the funny thing about it is one time we were down at Troy, and they had a little something, refreshments for the band afterwards over in the band room, and so we were over there, and I was sitting in the office with Johnny talking, and the band finally loaded the buses and left, and I'm still there. And I came outside, and there's no buses, and there was a highway patrolman out there, and he said, well, he says, come get in the car. He says, I'll catch them. So I got in the highway patrol car, and he ran the buses down but before they got to Montgomery. So, but I got left several times. I got left in Gadsden twice.
I didn't know they would leave without the band director.
Oh, the band director's not important.
Well, as you guys look back over the years, and you know, there's so many memories, and you know, we could probably go on for several days just sitting here talking. And I'll start with you, Dr. Finley. If you could just, as you look back over the program and where it's come from since you started it, basically, if you had to think of just one closing remark to sum up the past 50 years of watching this program and your involvement with it, I know that's a huge question to ask you, but what would come to mind if you had to sum up this anniversary celebration for the first 50 years of the program?
Well, I don't know. Now, just as far as the band itself is concerned, to what I said earlier, that I think a tremendous driving spirit that never quit, and it's still, and as I mentioned on one of my papers, that from the first note of the first time to the last note, it's always been a very spectacular group, exciting, always draw us. I don't know of any of the bands that hasn't drawn standing ovation more times than not. And that would be my thought of that.
I couldn't agree more. How about you, Dr. Walters? What would be your closing remarks to sum up the 50th anniversary?
Well, I guess the thing that I'd like to just sort of project is I think that I'm always just amazed at the way the people here and the band and everybody's accepted me. And, you know, I always appreciated, you know, how when I started out, how John helped me. And I'm always so grateful for you, because you know, there was a time when after I retired, you know, the band kind of fell off, and I was really worried about the band, and now the band is going along and it's so great, you know, and the fact that we're drawing students, you know, that are really like from Georgia, you know, we're drawing a lot of the all-state students and students that are really good, and it just tickles me to death that the band is going on the way it is. It really is. But it takes somebody almost that's been through Southerners to understand what we do.
That's true.
You know, so many bands, the students become a number, and they get up on the platform and say, 157, you're out of line. You know, not a good way to go, I don't think.
Well, I'll tell you, to both of you guys, you can't realize what an honor it is to be sitting here between both of you. And you know, so many programs that would still have former directors, especially to have the former directors still living in the town where the university is located. I mean, I would imagine that's pretty rare. Mm-hmm. But you know, just the support that I've received, and Dr. Finley, the amazing letters that you've sent me after concerts, even with the concert program, that means so much. And of course, Dr. Walters, as a mentor, as my band director, you know, just the way that you guys have supported me has meant so much. And you know, you never tried to step in and force your ideas of how you think the program should still be going. It's just an incredible feeling to know that, you know, I can try some new ideas of my own with the band and still have your support, and you know, for you to come back and for the alumni to see you after all the years that's passed, it's an amazing thing. And I get choked up just trying to talk about it, but I hope you guys realize how many people really, really, truly love you and appreciate what you've done for our program. And you know, that's one thing with the Southerners. As a director, and I'm sure you guys feel it as well, it's you feel like a family. Even as the director, the kids take you in as part of their family. And I just think it's a very unique thing. Mm-hmm. Right. That we have that. And a special gift for all of us to be able to share.
Yeah, I think so. And we appreciate you too.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.